My name is Elena Whitaker. I'm 36 years old, and on the coldest morning of last winter, my own brother stood 20 feet away from me in a disciplinary hearing room and tried to erase my entire life with a smile on his face. He looked flawless in his tailored charcoal suit, the same one he wore when he closed million-dollar deals. His voice was steady, almost sorrowful, as he told the three-member panel that I had been practicing law illegally for years. He said, I forged my bar admission documents. He claimed every case I'd ever won was built on lies. He painted me as a fraud who had tricked vulnerable clients and slipped through the system like a ghost. I sat there in complete silence, hands folded on the wooden table, listening to him bury me. Behind him, our parents sat like grieving statues, my mother in her pearl necklace, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. My father with his arms crossed, nodding slowly as if this was some tragic but necessary surgery. They had chosen their side long before we walked into that room. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. Not yet. The presiding judge, an older man named Harlan Whitaker. No relation, just one of those cosmic coincidences. Reached for the thick file in front of him. He opened it without expression, flipped through the first few pages, then the next. Suddenly his hand froze. I watched the color drain from his face so fast. It looked like someone had pulled a plug. His shoulders stiffened. He stared at one particular document for what felt like forever, then slowly lifted his eyes to meet mine. In that single second, something passed between us. Recognition, understanding, and maybe even a flicker of quiet fury. Without saying a word, Judge Whitaker stood up, clutched the entire file to his chest, like it was evidence, about to explode, and disappeared into his chambers. The room went deathly silent. My brother's perfect smile twitched for the first time. My mother stopped pretending to cry. My father's face shifted from righteous anger to confused panic. I sat there, still calm on the outside, but inside I felt something sharp and cold settle in my chest. I knew right then that someone was going to be destroyed in that room before the day was over. It just wasn't going to be me. Before I tell you what the judge discovered in that file and why my brother eventually dropped to his knees begging in front of everyone, let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand how we got here, you have to understand the kind of family I came from. A family that only loved you when you were useful. The Whitaker family never believed in love that couldn't be displayed, measured, or bragged about at country club dinners. Everything was performance. Everything was image. My father, Dr. Richard Whitaker, was a renowned cardiothoracic surgeon in Chicago. He saved the lives of politicians, CEOs, and old money families. People called him a hero. At home, he was cold, distant, and expected perfection from his children the same way he expected it in the operating room. My mother, Vivian Whitaker, turned charity galas into her personal stage. She wore designer dresses and talked about giving back, while quietly judging everyone who didn't meet her standards. Her love was conditional on how well we made the family look. And then there was my older brother, Marcus Whitaker, the golden child, the masterpiece. From the day he was born, they polished him like a trophy. Private schools, elite sports, the right internships, the right connections. Marcus learned early that affection in our house was currency. You earned it by being useful to the family brand. I was different. I asked too many questions. I noticed when my father spoke more gently to his rich patients than to his own wife. I hated the fake smiles at dinner parties. I was smart, maybe even smarter than Marcus in some ways. But that only made it worse. They couldn't call me stupid, so they labeled me difficult, rebellious, ungrateful. Law school was supposed to fix me, or at least make me fit the mold. Marcus went into corporate law at one of the biggest firms in Chicago. High stakes, seven-figure bonuses, the kind of work that made my parents beam with pride. I chose criminal defense. I wanted to stand beside people the system had already written off. People who couldn't afford to buy justice. At first, my parents treated my choice like a phase. Elena will come around, they said. But then I started winning cases. Real cases. Cases that made the local news. The breaking point came after I defended a single father wrongly accused of theft. The evidence was shaky, the prosecution was overconfident, and I tore their timeline apart in court. When the jury came back with not guilty, I felt something I had never felt in my parents' house. Genuine pride in my own work. I made the mistake of sharing that victory at Sunday dinner. The table went silent. My father asked if I enjoyed helping criminals escape justice. My mother worried what her friends would think. Marcus leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, and delivered one of his signature lines with that calm, cutting smile. "You've always preferred the gutter, Elena. Some people just aren't built for the penthouse." That sentence stayed with me for years, not because it broke me, but because it revealed exactly how they saw me. I was only lovable if I reflected their success back to them. If I made them look good. That night, I left the house without finishing dessert. My father warned me that if I walked away, I would lose everything that came with being a Whitaker. I told him I'd rather lose their money than keep renting my soul for their approval. As I drove away, Marcus followed me to the driveway and called out, "You'll be back within a year, little sister." Crawling. I turned around and said something I didn't know would become prophecy. "Pray that you never have to stand across from me in a courtroom, Marcus." I built my life the hard way after that night. My first office was on the third floor of an old brick building in a working neighborhood on the south side. The sign on the frosted glass door read Whitaker Defense. I kept the family name, but only because I wanted to prove I could carry it better than they ever did. The waiting room had two mismatched chairs, a second-hand coffee maker, and a window that rattled every time the L train passed. I lived on black coffee, takeout Thai food, and a stubbornness people mistook for recklessness. My early clients were the ones no one else wanted. Young black men the system treated as guilty until proven innocent, single mothers caught in welfare fraud traps, immigrants facing deportation on technicalities. I fought like hell for every single one of them. I hired two incredible people early on. Lena Torres, a brilliant paralegal with an almost scary memory for details, and Marcus, no relation, my investigator who used to work for the public defender's office. The three of us became a small but fierce team. We worked late nights, double-checked everything, and treated every case like it was personal. Meanwhile, Marcus's career looked perfect from the outside. Downtown high-rise, corner office, expensive car, photos from Aspen vacations posted religiously on social media. My parents couldn't stop talking about him. But success without integrity has a way of catching up. Years passed. I won bigger cases. My name started appearing in local legal circles as the defense attorney who actually read every page of discovery. Prosecutors began to respect me, even if they hated facing me. Judges knew I came prepared. My family watched from a distance. They never congratulated me. Instead, Marcus would occasionally send articles about burned-out solo practitioners or lawyers disbarred for misconduct. No message. Just the link. A quiet reminder that he was waiting for me to fail. I didn't fail. I built something real, something honest. But the more visible I became, the more I became a threat to the family image. Especially when my parents started hearing whispers at their social events. "Your daughter is that defense attorney making headlines?" It embarrassed them that I was succeeding on my own terms without their help, without playing their game. They had spent decades crafting the narrative that Marcus was the successful one, and I was the difficult daughter who chose the wrong path. My growing reputation was cracking that story. I didn't realize how much that crack scared them until the day Marcus decided to do something about it. He didn't just want to hurt me. He wanted to erase me. That Sunday dinner wasn't the last time they tried to pull me back into line, but it was the one that finally broke the illusion of family for good. A few months after I left the house, my mother called. Not to apologize, but to invite me to my father's birthday galas. She said it would look bad if the whole family wasn't there. I told her I had a hearing the next morning. She sighed the way she always did when I disappointed her, that long, theatrical exhale that said I was breaking her heart. Marcus texted me later that night. "Mom's upset. You know how she gets. Just show up for a couple hours. Play the part." I stared at that message for a long time. Play the part. That's all I had ever been to them. A supporting character in their perfect family story. I didn't go to the gala. Instead, I stayed late at the office, preparing for a case involving a teenage boy facing serious charges. When I finally won that case weeks later, something shifted inside me. I stopped waiting for their approval. I stopped hoping they would one day see me. I changed my emergency contact from my mother to Lena. I removed myself from the family group chat. I started building boundaries so high they would need a ladder and a prayer to reach me. But Marcus never stopped watching. He saw my name in the paper. He saw my small firm slowly gaining respect. And somewhere along the way, while I was quietly building my practice, his own polished world started cracking beneath the surface. I didn't know it then, but he was already sinking. He had made some aggressive investments with client money, the kind of moves that look brilliant when the market is up and become criminal when it turns. He patched holes with temporary transfers from escrow accounts, telling himself he would fix it before anyone noticed. He couldn't. And that's when I became the perfect solution. If he could publicly destroy me, expose me as a fraud, he could play the hero brother who put ethics above family. His firm could sweep in and rescue my clients. He could buy himself time and cover his own crimes with the appearance of moral courage. It was cruel. It was calculated. And it was exactly the kind of move someone like Marcus would call necessary. When the formal complaint landed on my desk one rainy Tuesday morning, signed by my brother and supported by affidavits from both our parents, I read it twice. Once as a daughter, once as a lawyer. The daughter cried for about 10 minutes. The lawyer started planning. After the complaint arrived, I didn't panic. I got quiet. That's what they never understood about me. My silence was never weakness. It was strategy. I called my mentor, a retired judge named Diane Hargrove, the same woman who had once told me I had rare instincts in the courtroom. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, then said the words that became my North Star. "Alina, this isn't a complaint. This is an assassination attempt. Treat it like one." I pulled every original document from bar admission out of a safe deposit box. I hired a forensic document examiner and a digital forensics expert. Lena and I spent nights comparing dates, fonts, metadata, routing information, anything that could expose the forgeries. Meanwhile, I kept showing up for my clients. I won 2 more cases in the weeks leading up to the hearing. I refused to let Marcus's attack freeze my life. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, I sat alone in my office with the fake evidence spread across the table and an old note from Judge Hargrove beside it. The note simply read, "Keep fighting the way you do. The system needs more like you." I let myself feel the weight for a moment. The betrayal, the exhaustion, The fear of losing everything I had built without their help. Then I folded the note, put it back in my drawer, and made a promise to myself. I would not just survive this. I would make sure Marcus never tried something like this again. The preparation was meticulous. We built binders with tabs, timelines, and certified records from the State Bar's physical archives. We got chain of custody documentation. We traced digital footprints back to computers at Marcus's firm. I didn't tell my parents I knew what they had done. I let them believe their plan was working. Some nights the loneliness hit hard. I would sit on my apartment balcony, overlooking the city lights, and wonder how blood could turn so cold. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered that dinner table, Marcus's cruel smile, my mother's disappointed sigh, and my father's conditional love. Those memories didn't break me anymore. They fueled me. By the time the hearing date arrived, I was ready. Not angry, not emotional. Ready. The case that really changed everything came almost 2 years before the hearing. A woman named Sofia Alvarez came to my office late one evening. Her husband had been charged in a complex financial fraud case tied to a major development project. The evidence looked perfect. Too perfect. Big firms wouldn't touch it because the other side had deep political connections and unlimited resources. I took the case anyway. For weeks, my team and I lived in the office. We dissected server logs, financial records, witness statements, and metadata. Something about the star witness's timeline didn't add up. One small delivery receipt became the key that unlocked everything. In the courtroom, I stayed calm. I asked quiet questions that seemed harmless until they weren't. By the time I finished cross-examination, the prosecution's case was bleeding out in public. The jury acquitted my client in under 4 hours. Reporters waited outside. The local legal community took notice. Even the judge, a tough, no-nonsense veteran, sent me a private note afterward that simply said, "Rare work, counselor. Don't let them dull your edge." That case put my name on the map in a way my family couldn't ignore. My parents saw the news coverage. Marcus saw it too. I know it ate at him, not because he was proud, but because it proved I could win without them. It shattered the family story they had told themselves for decades. What I didn't know at the time was that while I was winning in open court, Marcus was quietly drowning behind closed doors. His perfect investments had turned into a nightmare. Client money had been moved around to cover losses. An audit was coming. He needed a distraction. He needed a hero narrative. I became both. He spent months building the false case against me. Forged bar exam failure notices with manipulated dates, fabricated email chains, altered state database printouts. Even convinced our parents to sign affidavits claiming they had always known. Something was wrong with my credentials but had been too ashamed to speak up. It was sophisticated. It was vicious. And it almost worked. But almost wasn't enough. Marcus had always been good at hiding cracks. From the outside, his life still looked flawless. Sleek downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows, country club membership, luxury watch collection, and a steady stream of photos showing him shaking hands with important people. My parents shared every post like it was proof their parenting had been a success. But inside his firm, the walls were closing in. He had tied himself to a high-risk private investment fund pitched to wealthy clients as guaranteed wealth preservation. When the fund started losing money, Marcus did what desperate, arrogant people do. He started moving money from client escrow accounts to cover the gaps. Just temporary, he told himself. He would fix it when the next deal came through. The next deal never came. One major client demanded a full reconciliation. An internal audit was scheduled. Marcus realized he had only weeks, maybe days, before everything exploded. He needed two things desperately: a public image as a man of integrity and a large influx of new billable work to help patch the financial hole. Destroying me solved both problems beautifully. If he could expose his own sister as a fake attorney, he would look like the ethical hero who chose the profession over family. His firm could then step in to rescue my active cases, especially the high-value ones that were generating attention. It was the perfect cover. He started with our parents. He didn't pitch it as a lie. He pitched it as reputation management. He told them he had discovered irregularities in my licensing. He reminded them how embarrassing it would be if it became public. He gave them the role they craved most: the dignified victims, choosing principle over blood. My mother, who hadn't spoken to me warmly in years, suddenly became very involved. My father, who valued status up above almost everything, convinced himself that his golden son couldn't possibly be wrong. Together, they built the file. They hired a desperate IT specialist at Marcus's firm. They forged documents with surgical precision. They even brought in an old family friend willing to swear I had always been unstable. The complaint they filed was devastating on paper: unauthorized practice of law, fraud, deception of clients. If the disciplinary panel imposed even a temporary suspension, my practice could collapse before I cleared my name. When I read those pages, I felt something colder than anger. I felt clarity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I was going to fight it with the one thing they never expected from me: absolute, disciplined silence. Marcus's plan was elegant in its cruelty. Once the complaint was filed, he planned for his firm to reach out to my most important clients under the guise of emergency transitional representation. He would position himself as the caring brother cleaning up a family tragedy. The same clients I had fought for would be absorbed into his firm, generating the revenue he needed to survive the audit. He even had an internal email drafted, one my team later recovered, outlining exactly how they would divide my cases and how much billable time they could generate in the first 90 days. The worst part wasn't the forged documents. It was how personal it felt. Years earlier, when Marcus had quietly called me late one night after a bad investment nearly exposed him, I wired him money from my own savings. No questions. No judgment. Because some small part of me still remembered him as my big brother before he became this. He took that help and still chose to try to destroy me. When the formal complaint arrived with his signature and our parents' notarized affidavits, I read it once as a daughter. It hurt. Then I read it again as a lawyer, and something inside me clicked into place. I called my friend and colleague, Sarah Klein, one of the best disciplinary defense attorneys in the city. She came to my office, read the entire complaint in silence, then looked at me and said, "This isn't about ethics, Elena. This is about money and ego wearing a suit." We started building immediately. But I made one important decision. I told Sarah I didn't want to file for summary dismissal right away. I wanted Marcus under oath. I wanted him to commit to every lie in a room where he couldn't easily escape. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. She understood. This was no longer just about clearing my name. It was about ending this chapter permanently. Even with all the preparation, there were nights when the weight felt crushing. 3 days before the hearing, I sat alone in my office after everyone had left. Rain pounded against the windows. I looked at the forged documents on one side of the table and Judge Hargrove's old note on the other. For 10 quiet minutes, I let myself imagine the future Marcus wanted for me. Disbarred, discredited, watching my clients lose faith in me. Then I picked up the note again. "Keep fighting the way you do. I went home that night without tears, without fear, just cold, clear purpose. The complaint arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail with a return address I recognized immediately. I signed for it myself. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. When I opened it in the conference room with Lena and Sarah present, the room went very still. Page after page of carefully constructed lies. My parents' affidavits were the hardest to read. My mother claimed she remembered receiving a bar exam failure notice years ago. My father stated he had long suspected irregularities but had hoped I would come clean. They both expressed deep regret for not acting sooner, in the interest of public trust. Marcus's complaint letter was a masterpiece of false sorrow. He wrote about how much it pained him as a fellow attorney to come forward. But that, the integrity of the profession, must come before blood. I read every allegation carefully. Unauthorized practice, forged credentials, deception of clients, the kind of charges that could end a career before any real hearing even began. After the initial sting passed, I did what I do best. I started taking notes. We had less than 3 weeks until the hearing. In that time, we built a fortress of truth. I pulled every original licensing document, oath certificate, and CLE record. Sarah brought in forensic experts. We requested certified copies from the State Bar's physical archives. Not just the online database. We wanted paper trails that couldn't be easily disputed. I kept my regular caseload moving. I appeared in court. I met with clients. I refused to let Marcus paralyze my practice even for a day. But privately, I was preparing for war in the only way I knew how, with meticulous, invisible work. The night before the hearing, I stayed late one last time. I organized the binders. I reviewed every tab. I looked at the photos of my team on the wall and felt a surge of gratitude for the people who had chosen to stand with me. Then I drove home through the quiet city streets, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and went to bed early. No tears, no dramatic speeches to myself in the mirror. Just the calm certainty that comes when you've done the work and you know the truth is on your side. Tomorrow, the room would decide. But I already knew how this story was going to end. The weeks leading up to the hearing became a masterclass in quiet preparation. Sarah and I met every evening. We mapped out every possible argument Marcus might make and prepared responses with supporting exhibits. Lena cross-referenced dates, signatures, and digital metadata until her eyes were red. Our forensic expert found critical flaws. The forged bar notice used a signature block from an administrator who had retired 18 months earlier. The embedded fonts in the PDFs didn't exist in the state system at the time the document was supposedly issued. Even the digital creation stamps pointed back to a workstation at Marcus's firm. We didn't celebrate these discoveries, we simply logged them. I requested certified historical records from the state admissions office, physical microfiche copies with embossed seals. The kind of proof that couldn't be dismissed as digital manipulation. One particularly cold afternoon, I sat across from Sarah in her office as she reviewed our final binder. "You know this is going to get ugly," she said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but I'm not the one who needs to be afraid of ugly." She gave me a small, proud smile. The night before the hearing, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove past my parents' house. The lights were on. I could see the familiar chandelier in the dining room. For a moment, I let myself remember what it felt like to be a little girl who still believed her family would protect her. Then I drove away. Back at my apartment, I laid out my court clothes. The same simple black suit I wore for important trials. I reviewed my notes one final time. And then I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. Not out of happiness, but out of certainty. Marcus had spent months building a lie. I had spent those same months building the truth. And tomorrow, in that hearing room, the truth was finally going to speak. The night before the hearing was strangely peaceful. I cooked myself a simple dinner: grilled salmon, asparagus, and rice. I ate slowly at my kitchen counter, listening to soft jazz playing in the background. No heavy drinking, no anxious pacing. Just quiet. After dinner, I took a long shower, letting the hot water ease the tension in my shoulders. I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The lonely years building my practice. The clients whose lives I had fought for. The brother who once carried me on his shoulders when I was 5 and later tried to bury me as an adult. Before bed, I opened my journal. Something I hadn't touched in months. I didn't write about anger or betrayal. I wrote about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like after this was over. A stronger practice. A legal defense fund for young attorneys from ordinary backgrounds. A life free from the weight of conditional love. I slept deeply that night. No nightmares. No racing thoughts. When I woke the next morning, the city was covered in fresh snow. It felt symbolic somehow, like the world was being given a clean page. I dressed carefully. Simple black suit, white blouse, minimal makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw not a woman about to be destroyed, but a woman who had already survived. I picked up my briefcase, took one last look around my apartment, and whispered to myself, "Let's finish this." The drive to the disciplinary hearing building was quiet. No music. Just the sound of tires on wet snow. When I walked into the hearing room, Marcus was already there. He looked confident, almost relaxed. Our parents sat behind him like a united front. I took my seat at the defense table without looking at them. Sarah sat beside me and gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze under the table. The panel members filed in. Judge Harlan Whitaker took the center seat. Marcus stood first, ready to deliver what he clearly believed would be the performance of his life. I remained seated, calm, hands folded. Waiting. Marcus began exactly as I expected, polished, sorrowful, and utterly convincing. He told the panel he had come forward only because the integrity of the legal profession mattered more to him than blood. He described me as brilliant but troubled, ambitious but dishonest. He submitted the forged documents one by one with the solemn gravity of a man laying flowers on a grave he wished he didn't have to dig. My mother dabbed her eyes. My father stared straight ahead, refusing to meet my gaze. I said nothing. Sarah reserved our response. Then Judge Whitaker reached for the file. He flipped through the pages slowly. His expression changed. The color drained from his face. He stared at one document in particular for a long moment, then looked directly at me. Without a word, he stood up, clutched the entire file to his chest, and walked out of the room into his chambers. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's smile faltered. My mother's hand froze midair. My father looked genuinely confused for the first time. 15 minutes later, Judge Whitaker returned carrying 2 items, the disciplinary file and a framed court document. He didn't sit down. He placed the framed document on the bench facing the room. It was the verdict form from the Alvarez fraud trial I had won. Signed in his own courtroom. He looked at Marcus and asked, "Do you recognize this case, Mr. Whitaker?" Marcus hesitated, then said no. Judge Whitaker told him it represented one of the finest defense performances he had seen in 20 years, delivered by the very woman Marcus was accusing of never having been licensed. The room shifted. Marcus tried to recover. He argued that competence could be faked. Judge Whitaker cut him off and announced he had used the recess to verify my license through the physical state archives, not the online system. My license was valid, had always been valid. Then, tab by tab, Sarah began presenting our rebuttal evidence. Font discrepancies, digital timestamps, routing data, the forged signature of a retired administrator, the internal email from Marcus's firm outlining plans to absorb my clients. The silence in the room became heavier than any shout. Judge Whitaker read Marcus's internal email aloud slowly. When he finished, he looked at my brother with visible disgust. "So this was never about ethics," he said. "This was theft dressed up as virtue." Marcus started talking too fast. He blamed the IT specialist. He blamed a misunderstanding. He even tried to throw our parents under the bus, claiming they had pressured him into action because they were embarrassed by me. My father actually stood up and protested that Marcus was lying. My mother began crying. Real tears this time. The ugly kind that come when you realize reputation can't outrun evidence. Judge Whitaker ordered both of them to sit down. They were no longer grieving witnesses. They were potential accomplices. That was the moment Marcus truly broke. He left the lectern, stumbled toward my table, and dropped to his knees right there on the hearing room floor. He grabbed the edge of the counsel table with both hands and looked up at me with desperate, shattered eyes. "Alina," he said, voice cracking, "please. You know how this works. If this goes criminal, it destroys everything. I can fix it. I'll transfer the condo. I'll liquidate accounts. I'll give you whatever you want. Just stop this." I looked down at him and felt something colder than rage. I felt clarity. Behind him, my father took one step backward as if afraid the scene might contaminate him. My mother whispered Marcus's name, but when he turned to them for rescue, both of them looked away. That, I think, hurt him more than anything, the judge said. Not the evidence, not the deputies entering the room on Judge Whitaker's order, but watching our parents choose distance the exact moment he stopped being useful. Judge Whitaker directed the sheriff's deputies to take Marcus into custody pending charges for perjury, submission of false evidence, obstruction, and potential financial crimes. As they lifted him, Marcus started begging again. Higher, uglier, promising desperation had made him do it. Judge Whitaker looked at him and said calmly, "Men like you always mean exactly as far as they believe they can get away with." Then he dismissed all charges against me with prejudice, ordered the record sealed, and apologized to me on the record for the abusive process. I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and simply asked if I was excused because I had a hearing scheduled the next morning. The corner of Judge Whitaker's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough. "You are excused, counselor. Unlike the complainant, you have actual work to do." What happened after the hearing was slower, but far more permanent. Marcus's firm suspended him the same day and terminated him within the week. Their own internal investigation revealed the full extent of his escrow manipulations. Criminal charges followed. He lost his license, his condo, his reputation, and most of the people who had only ever loved his success. My parents were not arrested, but they were named in enough filings to destroy the polished version of their lives. The charity circles stopped calling. The hospital boards quietly removed my father. Within a year, they sold the family home. Marcus sent letters, long handwritten apologies, explanations, pleas about childhood and blood. I never opened them. Sarah helped me obtain a restraining order after the third attempt to contact me through intermediaries. My firm didn't just survive, it grew stronger. Clients came to me because of what happened. Judges who once only knew me by reputation now saw exactly what I was made of. Lena framed the dismissal order and hung it in our conference room. We called it our new family portrait. A year later, I launched the Whitaker Defense Fund. a nonprofit supporting young attorneys from ordinary backgrounds who face institutional gatekeeping. I did it because I knew too well how many gatekeepers confuse power with worth. And because real justice, when done right, doesn't just punish what tried to break you. It builds something stronger in the space left behind. Sometimes people ask if I feel sorry for Marcus now. The honest answer is no. I understand him better than I wish I did, but understanding is not forgiveness. He made choices believing his future mattered more than my existence. The law finally answered him in a language he respected. As for my parents, I buried that version of family long before any court made it official. Blood is not a covenant when it only flows one way. Family is the people who stand beside the truth, even when it costs them something. If your own family ever tries to bury you to save themselves, remember this. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your future. You owe it to yourself to become the kind of person who can walk away and build something better. Type the word boundaries in the comments if this story hit home for you. Thank you for sitting with me through this.